Welcome back to Hot Mess Espresso, guys. We have Rhonda Parker-Taylor on the podcast today, who is an author and just an all-around energy of resilience. Rhonda, welcome in.
Thank you, thank you, thank you for having me. And if I had thought about it, I would have had my espresso ready, but I have to stick to water today.
I should probably drink some water today because as of recording, it is 4:08 p.m. and we're just surviving on energy drinks today. So we're gonna have some water after this. Thank you for reminding me. So, your first book, what inspired you to write that? Like, tell me all the things.
Sure. Crossroads is a suspense thriller. And most people would say, why would you pick a suspense thriller? You know, you're an academia person, you're a consultant, you're in business. Why wouldn't you do like a self help book first? And I had every intentions when I wrote Crossroads of doing the others too, but
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to prove I could do it. I loved to read, and I loved a good thriller that keeps you hooked and clue based.
Mm-hmm.
Not for me. I'm not more of a like a fantasy or a horror reader. I was more of the clue based here, and I thought
Yes.
I think I can do this. And I really
Mm-hmm.
want to prove I can do it. So the first reason was because I wanted to prove I could do it.
Hey,
And
that's always a valid reason. I do a lot of things out of spite, and it's worked out for me.
yeah, and when you find out that you can do something, at first, then I sat it down and wrote another, and that's when we were talking offline about
Mm-hmm.
the series, and that there's the Journey of Hope and a couple of other ones because I take all the characters and keep moving them with me. But
I love that.
Crossroads was my labor of love.
Mm-hmm.
It was the one that I showed I could do it. I built it where it was based out of Indianapolis, which is an area I know well.
Mm-hmm.
But then the crime itself was fiction. So all the sites are real. So I did the research on the site. So it has some of the, thoughts of what people think of the city and what they see. And so it has the city county building. It has the circle. It has, Holiday Park, and the dead bodies found behind Lafayette Square Mall and on the railroad tracks. So everybody that's ever been here will be able to identify with the sites. I'm hoping that helps people really buy into the fact of what the development of the characters.
Yeah, that's literally what I was just gonna say. Like, especially for a visual person, if you've ever been to Indianapolis, like you can almost like kind of picture the whole thing. And like, I also love a good thriller. I grew up on the Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew. Like that was my thing. So a good like thriller mystery, I'm like, sign me up.
Exactly, and so I wanted I wanted it to be fiction, and but I wanted the sites to be real. I wanted
Mm-hmm.
people to identify with it, and so then as I was developing it, I realized that I was developing characters for some of the self help books I was doing, and so it was like I had been multitasking. So I use every character as a case study for the self help. Every character in Crossroads is out of life balance. So you have the main character, Paris Pennington. She's a workaholic. She works in finance. She works downtown Indianapolis. She's one of those people you'd see hustling and bustling from appointment to appointment. And then she gets called to jury duty. Well, if you know anybody that's a workaholic, you throw something new in their lives and everything falls apart, right?
Especially
And
jury duty.
she tried to get out of it, I swear, but she can't. And then you had Dave, who was the prosecutor, and he's the law and order guy. Everything's about being right and wrong, and getting justice. And even his reflections and stuff are about what he thinks about the circle, and why did they build it, and what his parents told him about it, and so it kind of pulls in that here again Indianapolis history, but at the same time it's building what it's like to live in the Midwest, where your identity is your work.
Mm-hmm.
So in his own right, he's imbalanced because he's putting everything on Law and Order and making sure that, he's getting justice for his clients.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have Billy Nichols. He's the co-defendant of the murder. And he has to decide whether he's going to turn on his friends, because his loyalty is friends.
Right.
He wants to, he was warned, stay away from them. They're not good for you. Now he's a co-defendant for a murder. So does he turn, become a rat, become everything he's been taught that he hates, or does he go ahead and take the charge
Ooh.
with his friend? So you have all these people are out of character, out of balance. And when you're out of balance, what you find is you're not meeting your purpose.
Mm-hmm.
In any way, you're so focused on one area of your life that you can't fulfill any of the other areas. And when you do that, things start happening to you in your real life, which is why Meryl Hemingway endorsed Crossroads, because when we submitted it for her to read to see if she would include it in her book club, she came back with not only just a yes, she wrote the foreword and submitted a YouTube video that described the book and why she liked it so much. And if anybody out there wants to listen to the video, it's called Meryl Hemingway Praises Rhonda Parker-Taylor's Crossroads. The reason is her life has all been up and down. Anybody that's watched any of the documentaries, she's an Academy Award winning actress, Golden Globe actress, granddaughter of the great Ernest Hemingway. And so you would think, oh, she's got a charmed life. Well, she's had challenges too throughout, whether it be, fighting with mental health, because she wasn't balanced in her life, or whether it be, her own family's mental health issues. So she's a very big advocate for us to do what's right for us in our own purpose, and make sure that we play, and that we make sure that we stay in line with what's best for us. And in the last part of the video, she says, we all reach a crossroads, which is what the book's all about, where we have to decide what's best for us. And even chocolate has an expiration date. And so Crossroads is not only just a labor of love for me, it's building on the fact that we have to know what our own purpose is and pursue it. And when we get out of balance, that's when things start going awry. And in this case, it's like a clue-based Agatha Christie clues of, who's doing things to the different characters that's causing death, destruction, illness, etc.
Yeah, it is definitely on my TBR. I'm just very committed to attempting to finish the 15 unread books in my house right now. Plus, I'm moving in a few months, so I'm like, if I buy another book, I have to pack it. So that'll be my little reward to myself, because don't get me started on how much I love thrillers, especially if it's a page turner. And of course, not just a black and white thriller, but one that actually has some conflict in it,
Right.
self-conflict. I love that.
So the three emotions or motives possible, if you're going to play the game of Clue, is anger, fury, and envy. All of the characters reflect that at some point.
Mm-hmm.
But what I've done is those three could be a motive. And in Proverbs, it says, anger is cruel, fury is overwhelming, but who can stand before jealousy? So you have to decide, is the cruelty of anger what did it? Was it the, fury that did it? Or was it the actual envy of others and the other characters that did it? And so you have to kind of go along the journey to figure out who did it, what was their motive, and why, and how.
How much fun was it writing this book? Because I'm just seeing you light up. So it had to have been an absolute blast.
I loved it, and I loved creating the characters. The character development, what I did is I started using the DSM-5 It's the diagnostic mental health disorder
Mm-hmm.
manual, so I got it out, and so that all the characters have some kind of flaw in them, because we all have flaws,
Exactly.
but be anxiety or and so we also are relating to them because they could be us.
Mm-hmm.
It could be us that's fighting maybe some depression, or it may be us that has anxiety, or maybe us that has emphysema, and when you get excited you're coughing because you can't because you can't breathe. And so when I started using some psychology in the development of the behaviors of the characters, I realized I was creating a world and characters that I didn't want to let go.
I love that. Was there like a kind of like a particular reason that you really wanted to focus on like the psychology behind it and things like that? Or have you always just kind of been into psychology?
I'm a trainer and developer, so
Mm-hmm.
I love people. I love knowing what their motivations are. I like to make them successful. So with that being part of my trade, I think it's part of my makeup and my writing too.
Right. Now, you and I have talked off camera, obviously. And you mentioned it in the book, but like a lot of what you do and what you enjoy speaking on is aligning yourself with a purpose. Um, it's pretty self-explanatory, but can you just kind of go into detail on like your interpretation of that?
Sure. For me, so many times we get swayed by what we think we ought to be, whether it be from voices of others saying, "Oh, you need to do this, or you need to be that, or you need to buy this house, you need to, have this car, and we never, you need to have this job."
Hmm.
And we never really think about what is really what will make me happy. And if we don't ask those questions, we never find our own purpose, and so we don't ever live our own life. So, for me, finding one's purpose is where you close your eyes and you reflect for a second and you say, if I woke up tomorrow and everything was perfect, what would my life really look like?
Mm,
There is no such thing as a perfect life. We know that.
right.
But, at first, what you start thinking about is all the materialistic things. You won the lottery and you got the house with 16 bedrooms and 9 dining rooms, and then you realize, wait a minute, is that really the life that's best for me? Is that really what's going to make me happy? Is that really what's going to get me up in the morning with a smile? And so when you start living with more intentionality and realize, okay, I have to live the world that I'm given and create the world that I want. And when you do that, you're happier. You quit comparing yourself to the social media of what other people have, or what their lives look like, or what the neighbor's new car looks like, or the boat or the house. And you start realizing, okay, I love to cook. I love fruits and vegetables. I want to make sure that, I'm healthy. I want to make sure that I'm doing well with my clients. I want to be able to um, play with my dogs and see wildlife on a regular basis. So for me, for instance, if at first when I would do the 19 bedrooms and 8, I'm like, I don't want to clean that. I don't want to maintain that. Could you imagine? So
Like, no.
I don't mind being on a lawnmower. So I ended up getting, for me, a smaller home. It's only me and my husband, so we don't
Hmm.
need, 18 bedrooms,
Hmm.
and more yard where I could have wildlife. I can put berries on the fence line and not have to sit there and prune them because they're overtaking everything. I can have deer coming through, and there's nothing better than to watch baby deer in the spring. And they're going through your yard to the neighbor's yard where there's the the lakeage, or you see a coyote hunting, and
Hmm.
you're rooting for the squirrel, but it's amazing to watch, right?
Yeah.
uh, or you see, any of the wildlife that can come through, just even in an urban setting, you know so for me, that was it's my joy spot. So, it's like finding that my life can change daily. So I need to enjoy every second. It could be, I have a small chair because I'm kind of a small person. I'm not very tall.
Hmm.
And so I have this small chair that was my grandmother's, and I sit in the bay window. We call it my perch because I can see everything in the whole yard, and I can sit there and see the hawks fly down. And for me, that brings me happiness because I'm not only I'm it's almost like I'm on a vacation in my own home. So my goal is to make my life more easy daily at home than create a life that was not intended for me,
No,
or
I
even want a life that was not create for me.
no, I 1000% agree. I remember when my ex-husband and I first got our dog, and I was a stay-at-home dog mom for a while, and I was like, ugh, I can't do this. Like, this is like, and now I'm just kind of like, I wouldn't mind hanging out with her all the time. And I think it's because I'm finally doing things that I love to do. So now, like, it's kind of like, it's a little bit of, a far off, unattainable dream. But my dream would be to just hang out with my dog all the time and take her everywhere. And it's crazy how that perspective changes when you're finally starting to put things in place that make you happy, that give you a purpose, that make you like sleep at night, basically. So, and
Exactly.
like right now, I do aesthetics and I do this podcast, and I've got my mental health issues, but overall, I couldn't be fucking happier.
Right. And we all have, and that's what people don't realize is we all are on some kind of spectrum, some kind of,
Mm-hmm.
diagnosis close to maybe this week we are, next week we are. Um, and it's important that we realize that it's not just our strengths and our weaknesses that we look at, it's our mindset, learning to take control and shifting it from a negative mindset to a positive one. And there's so many techniques you can use through your senses, visualization, smells, doing your own aromatherapy at home. You can. I love sensory candles where they light up on their own. At
Mm-hmm.
7 o'clock at night, I'm looking around looking for the sensory candle to light up and ready for it to go because it just relaxes me. And then using diaphragm breathing with it, you're like, oh my goodness, life is perfect when you make it that way for you.
Yeah, and it's definitely not an easy perspective shift at all
Mm-mm.
to go from, especially like if your brain has been wired in the negative self-talk and
Right,
like all it was focused on was the things you were doing wrong, and now having to shift it to being not only like being okay with the positive end of things, but being able to mentally celebrate it. Like
right,
a lot of people, me included, if I'm doing something like great and people are like, oh my God, like, you're doing great with this. Like, we're proud of you. Like you're doing this, you're doing that. I'm just like, I mean, like, mm,
right.
but so that changes, like, it's difficult, but it's doable because if I can do it, literally anyone can.
Well, and that's just it. You just have to commit to it. I use journaling, poem writing, my writing to express even the bumps in the roads that maybe I've gone
Mm-hmm.
through. And it may not be that I'm writing about my scenario that happened to me, but life hits all the time for me, for everybody, and you
Mm-hmm.
can't stop it. You experience deaths, you experience life, you experience financial issues, you experience all kinds of ups and downs. And if I can journal and I can write, I can learn how to really express not only myself, but also just be able to understand it. I'll give you an example. First scene in Crossroads is the finding of the dead body of a 15-year-old girl. I've never been killed. but I have had a knife pulled on me before. So
Mhm.
when I explored what if something had happened? What if that had been me? What would the police have gone through? What would the loved ones gone through? What would, you know, and it allowed me to write and go through those emotions too, at the same time as realizing that, life is precious, and the way our mindset helps us will allow us to make shifts in our own storms. We are the energy, that's my analogy. We are the energy of our storm. Even if it's
I like
life
that.
hitting us and we had nothing to do with the reason, we have the power to shift our mindset to lower it or become part of the I rather than the one tossed around.
No, I absolutely agree.
We either add to the storm or we diminish that storm's ability to shamble everything around or destroy everything around like a tornado. So we are that energy.
Mhm.
And when life does hit, sometimes we're shattered glass. So we have to control it. But as our shattered glass of our own identity falls to the bottom of the ocean storm is still working on us.
Mhm.
And it's taking that piece of glass that's in millions of pieces, and it's making it really smooth. As the and as it becomes smooth, it's the glass starts rising and gets spit back up on the beach, because that time will pass, and we have now become sea glass. One of the most beautiful, precious things that they use to make artwork and jewelry out of. It's a gem.
Yeah,
They're beautiful. Anybody out there listening, look up what sea glass looks like. And it's
it's
usually
absolutely stunning.
blues and reds and pinks, and it's glass that has been transformed. So you're no longer just a piece of glass when you're transformed. And you've been shattered by life and experiences. You're now part of a whole new perspective, which is a transformation to sea glass.
Yeah. Like, to kind of add to that, it's a little rough sometimes when you're trying to like change your perspective because it's such a slippery slope into toxic positivity where
Mm-hmm.
like you're not allowing yourself to feel. Like I've said it before on previous episodes, but I give myself 24 hours to
Mm-hmm.
feel the feelings. And there are obviously some things that are going to carry on past that 24 hours. But I give myself the 24 hours to basically throw myself the pity party. And then I'm like, after that, like, I just got to keep it moving. Like, I can still deal with it, but it can't be at the forefront anymore. Like, it's got to be kind of like here or like a little behind, but it can't be right in front of me anymore.
Right. And that's part of the name it and claiming it.
Hmm.
Once you name your pain, but you have to face it. Like you said, you have to allow yourself to feel
It's hard.
it. And once you've named it, though, you can make those shifts and start, like you said, dealing with it on life's terms.
Absolutely. Now, your second book, it has not come out yet.
No.
Um, and between when we last talked and now,
Mhm.
there's been a title change.
Yeah.
So, um, what can you tell us about the second book?
So the second book, when we originally talked, was The Journey of Hope,
Hmm.
Hope Journey, and now it's been changed. Well, no, it was Hope's it's called The Journey of Hope now. So in that book, it takes one of the characters and shows their story, and it's one of the young girls. And in her case, it's, instead of it being about life balance, it's about victimization. And why is she a victim in her life? And she asks that question. And in that, my goal is that people will relate to the fact that you have to choose sometimes to pick your own safety.
Mm,
Because if you're not practicing safety, you're the ones people will prey on. Now, it doesn't
1000%.
mean you can stop everything from happening to you, but the goal is to show that how her actions many times are why she's being victimized, because she's being selected as being weak. She's being selected as being passive, that won't say no, won't scream, won't, these different things.
Right. And we had also kind of talked about how to stay resilient and not fall into like the victim complex, but also that there are points that are voluntary and then involuntary and how to kind of navigate that. Can you touch on that a little bit?
Sure. So, actually, a book that's coming out, it'll probably come out before the Journey of Hope because it's already done.
Mhm.
It's called Resilience, and Resilience is a self help book, but it's also an educational and a 31-day challenge. So
Ooh.
what it does is the first half of it is education on what resilience is. Resilience is you have four different kinds of resilience. You have your spiritual resilience, your emotional resilience, your physical resilience, and I've forgotten for some reason and which ones I've named, and emotional, spiritual, physical, and I can't from I've got a blank right now. But what it does is it goes through and it says, what is resilience? How do we get it? And how do we keep it? And what practices can you have? And it goes through all of that. And then the last half of the book is 31 days where it actually has the activities so you can rebuild your own, you can identify your gratitudes, you can figure out where your strengths and weaknesses are in your resilience. And it's like a meditation book or a devotional book. Different people would call them different things, but you actually it has a poems that I've written during my struggles. So most of them are around storms and how to or getting back up and getting up the mountain even when you feel like you can't.
I absolutely love that. What are some of your like favorite meditation practices besides your perch out the window?
Well, one is to open up the windows. Seem to be my thing. I
Well,
love
yeah.
lines. Breathing, the box diaphragm breathing. I love to be able um, to push out any negativity that I might already be doing. I love visualization and journaling for as a meditation. I also have recently, because I found that I was wanting to always buy cut fruits and vegetables so I wouldn't have to do it. My mindset was like, oh, that's work. Why would I want to do that? Just buy them. And then, there's lots of reasons you should do it yourself. One, for the cleanliness of it. Two, what kitchen it's been done in, you don't know contaminants, all of these reasons. And I'm like, why am I having this mindset? So I started when I wash them and cut them, I start visualizing what they're going to do for me, these beautiful fruits and vegetables. So as I'm washing them, I picture what that grape's going to do without the toxins on it. What that, if I'm chopping something up, I might be thinking of somebody that made me mad that day, but getting that negative,
Right.
frustration out of the cut and during the cutting process. Um, Hopefully it doesn't go into mental health at that point.
I mean, I'm not judging.
But I do. I try to picture what will do to me when I've eaten it.
Mhm.
Whether I'm putting it in a warm stew and or whatever it might be that I'm doing or making that day, and I find that I enjoy it. It's like I find that it makes me more satisfied to do that because I'm visualizing the health that it's going to bring.
No, I absolutely love that. You had said you're big on journaling, obviously.
Hmm.
Do you feel that when you're journaling, like you're able to get the negative emotions out, whether it's positive or negative, and especially with the negative, and then you can kind of read it back and like rationalize it a little bit more versus like just immediately reacting?
Oh, I definitely do. Not only just that, it allows me to see where my mind was at that time. I was looking to see if I had. Because sometimes I keep some of the journaling or the poems with me, but it doesn't look like I have any of them here on my desk. See if I do. It allows me to repicture and revisit too. Because when you reflect back on what you were going through at the time, you also see when you're right and you're wrong.
Mm, that
And
is
it
very
also
true.
sees your mindset's off. And you also see beauty, in your words or your thoughts. Um, whether it be that you came up with the sea glass idea, or whether it might be that you came up with the a particular good saying about the storms or what you've experienced. And so when I journal, I like to go back and reflect on them because it allows me to grow.
I Yeah, that makes complete sense. But I also feel like you can kind of look back like 6 months from now and be like, "Wow, I'm handling that so much differently than I would have a few
Right.
months ago." And it's like on paper,
Right.
especially like when you're shifting your perspective and you're growing and you don't really feel like you're growing all that much because you're with you're wow, I can talk today. You're with yourself day to day. So you're not really going to see that big growth
Right.
until you're literally looking back and you're like, I'm handling this so much better than I used to. And it's still probably not the best, but a win is a win.
Exactly. So this would be a. I don't know if I can get it on the
Sort of.
sword. It. I also then go look for pictures.
Ooh.
So like, let's say I've journaled about something. I'm like, well, what would others think about that? And then whether I be Googling it or whether I go through, a free photo, thing, or and pull it out, and I find all these ideas. Like maybe they pick a maze because that's what's close to what you're thinking about, or maybe they pick a sand, or maybe wildlife, or what, it could be anything that it picks from what you've said.
Yeah,
And then I visualize, then I can visualize it.
that's I'm gonna use that. I'm I'm just stealing that because I'm a very visual person. So
Mm-hmm.
for me, I'm just like, there's just the hamster wheels clicking currently as you're talking. So it's like, oh, I need to put that into my daily whatever. So so how many books do you just have the one out right now, correct? And then you've got
And I'm working on getting the others out now. They are either in different phases, editing, with the publisher, ready to go. They're at different varying levels.
yeah. So I mean to kind of, not necessarily wrap it, but just conclude like writing is definitely that purpose that you feel the most at home with.
I think that writing allows me to express myself in a way that others might relate. And I think that is my purpose, is to be able to say, hey, we all go through hard times. Let's just get up and let's do this together. Which is
Exactly.
my coaching. I do a lot of that with my coaching. Whether it's someone trying to pass their licensing exam, their law exam, and they need that mental stimulation to keep them on track for their studying purposes, or whether it be a dissertation and they're doing their research.
Mhm.
It really allows a person to grow when they have someone sometimes that just kind of puts it in perspective.
Now, what kind of coaching do you do? Is it more like life coaching or is there kind of like a little more niched area?
Most of it is academic for capstones, dissertations through the schools, but I do life coaching. Like, for instance, if someone needed someone like to check in with for one of those projects, they're doing it on their own. They've got their committee already there, but maybe they're not emotionally ready. because one of the topics that I deal with is a lot of emotional intelligence. I
Hmm.
do public speaking on emotional intelligence. I did a large study for the UN Global Compact Committee on emotional intelligence and the multinational leader, and so I have permission to use different emotional intelligence testing to see where we are and whether we want to grow in that.
Yeah. When it comes to emotional intelligence, that's like a big hot topic. Especially when it comes to just millennials and jobs and dating and all of that. What's like your biggest surprise that you found when it comes to emotional intelligence?
Well, the reason I started studying it was because I'm not the brightest bulb in the bunch. I always struggled. And, people are, oh, you're not going to be successful because, you don't have the high IQ and the math skills. And so that negative connotation, I flunked kindergarten. So that tells you a lot from the very beginning. I struggled. And emotional intelligence tells you that it's not the IQ that makes you successful. It's the EQ. It's the people skills. So what surprised me most is the importance of deconstructing your own views so that you can accept somebody else's views.
That's a huge one, and I that kind of answers my next question of like if someone's trying to change their perspective and be more emotionally intelligent, how do they start, in your opinion?
One is to self-awareness. Where did
Hmm.
where did all these thoughts come from? Where did you learn them? Was it your church, your home, your school? Where did you learn them? Do you really even agree with them?
Ooh, that's a big one.
Because sometimes you just going along the road because that's what you've been told
Yeah.
to agree. You have a choice in this matter to agree or not agree on topics. And then if you do agree, then you can do status quo, but then realize other people don't agree, and sometimes, and why. We don't want cookie cutters of ourselves because
No.
life would be very.
No, it absolutely would. I feel like I spent a lot of my 20s, especially like mid to late, deconstructing a lot, and it wasn't just like religiously, it was deconstructing all of the foundation
Mm-hmm.
that was me
Right.
and kind of rebuilding that. And that took a lot. I was in therapy for a very long time, still am. But like that part right there with the deconstructing and actually figuring out like who I am and what I stand for and what my passions are and stuff like that. It's it's not easy at all.
It's not easy once you even know it
Right.
to follow it because it's so easy to sway yourself.
Mm.
And that's when we're not in balance with ourselves. We start doing things that it's like, where did that come from? I can
Yeah.
having a conversation with my husband, and he's like, you look like a liar when you say that. And I wasn't lying. I was skirting the issue. I
Mm.
was softening the points. I was in, I'm like, well, but I don't, and he's like, but when you're not direct, when you're not, it looks like you're lying.
Yeah,
And
but
I'm like, to really think about how I'm wording things.
yeah.
Because sometimes our values may be internal and we think we're following them, but that's not what others even see.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a time and place for direct. I feel like I definitely have to find a way to be a little bit more direct where it's not necessarily that I'm agreeing with someone, but I also know that being direct is not going to get me anywhere and it's just going to make the situation worse. I have learned to sit back and observe
That's
more
very
often than not, which
pause, listen, and then your can be softened without, but be clear.
yeah, learning not to pop off
Mm-hmm.
has been the hardest lesson of my life. But it's been well beyond worth it to just sit back and like think of your points and think of like how you want to approach it because you can't always come in guns blazing.
Right, exactly. Exactly. You have to, that's all part of the model of emotional intelligence. You first self-awareness, then after you have self-awareness, You have to start thinking about others and how they handle their emotions. And so you have your intrapersonal skills that's important.
Mhm.
And then once you have that, you have to add your empathy and stress management and be able to handle the stress of the conversation and the tension in the room when you have two different thought processes. And then once you've gotten that done, your general mood will improve.
I think with the empathy too, you have to find the flow of empathy versus boundaries,
Yeah.
because I know I attract literal energy vampires worth of people because my empathy is so strong.
Mhm.
And I've had to learn how to set boundaries, and I'm still learning. And I literally set a boundary like yesterday, and I was like, I set a boundary. And everyone that is really good with boundaries is like, duh. But for me, it was like, it was a big deal because usually I am like super understanding and I make an excuse for everything. And, you have to see their side. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do that when it comes to this. It was difficult.
Yeah. And it's very hard. It's very hard to set those boundaries.
Yeah. So for you people pleasers out there, it's going to be okay. You can set the boundary. I swear to God, half of these people, including myself, that are like, I'm in my villain era. It's like, no, I'm just not letting people run all over me. And I set like a single semi-hard boundary once. It's just, but what I love about Crossroads is it just shows that there are so many different mediums for people to be seen and heard and understood, because like the podcast does that, but I never thought about the perspective that reading does that. And I've related to characters a million times. There
Right.
are certain books that have literally healed part of my brain chemistry,
Right.
but you don't think like a it, and it probably comes really naturally to make people feel seen because it's a page turner, it's a thriller, and you don't even realize that you've been like understood until you're at the end and you're like, oh, well.
Exactly. Exactly. And when you do it that way, that was my goal. That was my hope for people, that they would read it and they're like, oh, I need to really think and reflect about my relationships, my life, my how I'm navigating work life balance and relationship balance, and because it's all about those boundaries and those relationships and how they perceive life, and when you're focused on one area, you're just not focused on all the others.
You definitely are not. So what's next for you besides the books coming out?
I'm reorganizing my pantry.
Oh my God, literally, that is the biggest. That is so difficult. I swear to God.
I'm getting it where I can just pull things out, cook with joy.
See, I need to get to the cooking with joy part. I cook with anxiety right now. So eventually I will enjoy cooking, probably, maybe. But right
Is
now
it,
it just stresses me out.
well, maybe you're probably putting too much into it then. Like I found that the simplest ways of making things make it the best. Like whether it's a slow cook, something in the like, let's say ribs. You would think that's the most complicated things to eat to make in the world.
Hmm.
It's no different than cooking a roast. Put it in the oven or in the smoker for 8 hours in foil and let it cook while you work,
That is
and
true.
it'll be done. It's tender. Then you just open it up, and if you want it a little bit more crusty, you put your barbecue on that, or but you could just the first part's just the dry rub. You put your stuff in there, put it in in the oven for 8 hours at 225, and or five, depending how big of a one, 5 hours, or and it comes out perfect every single time. You don't have to do a thing.
Well, here we are, making ribs with Rhonda over here. It's fine. Like, I'm literally like, okay, good. I'm glad this is like on record so I can go back and be like, so it was how many degrees? So, yeah, this has been so enlightening, but thank you so much for just talking and all of this.
Oh, I'm so glad that you had me on, and we finally, we've
I know.
communicated email a few times. I think I went through a storm. You had some things that had happened, so I'm
Ugh,
so glad we got it connected where we could be a hot mess espresso together.
I mean,
And
that is the whole point.
everybody out there, if you enjoyed it, hit like, and share and subscribe, because when someone's putting their effort into things and trying to bring you some content that maybe enlightens you into different subjects, you really can use that as a tool. It's an easy way to get knowledge.
It really is. I've gotten that feedback a few times. Where can we find your books?
So, Crossroads and all of them will always be on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. If they're in the stores in Indiana, for sure, Illinois, I've gone in and signed them all
Hmm.
so that people could get a signed copy. Outside of those areas, I haven't traveled in anywhere outside of there to sign any. My website, you can go to my website, RhondaParker-Taylor.com. That will also give you all my social medias. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, TikTok. I think that's it. Those are the main ones. So you could do the same thing. Go in and follow. Send me an email. There's a link on my website to be able to send me an email if you have any questions, or you'd like to continue the conversation.
I love that. Rhonda, thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.